Welcome to those who are reading and listening. This is Bo Adams from Unboundary in Atlanta, Georgia, talking to Grant Lichtman, who's on his incredible ed journey, crossing the United States and back in 3 months, visiting more than 55 or 60 schools to talk about education innovation and to look for trends, patterns, and ways into the future of schools and schools of the future. So, Grant, I think we're on episode 5 now, which means you're coming to a close of week 4 of Ed Journey. It's good to see you. And some of what you've been writing about lately has been about departmental review, voluntary departmental review. And I re-listened to a podcast recently from Daniel Pink interviewing Bob Sutton, I think. And they talked about those people that are able to get into the future best are the self-aware people. And it seemed to me that these schools that are choosing to have voluntary departmental review become very self-aware at a different level. They don't just wait for the mandatory 5-year accreditation. Can you talk some about that process and what you feel like it's adding to these schools?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure 100% of what's been added other than probably a bit of a shift in mindset. But the interesting thing to me has been coming from a school where we haven't really practiced that. And I remember when we did back in the day, it really was something that seemed to be imposed by the head who said, let's bring in a team. And a couple of schools that we've been visiting, and the most dramatic example was Culver Academies back in Indiana, but several of the New York schools have had their faculty either request or certainly acquiesce to having outside teams come in to just review what they're doing, and there's been some really positive results. I would say the heads have told me that they've had reports that have resulted in changes in how they teach, what they're teaching, sometimes personnel changes, maybe shifting chair departments, things like that. But the good part, the really positive part, I think, is when I hear from faculty that they're actually looking forward to these because they're able to choose the colleagues that come in outside, and they're not sticking just with K-12 educators, but they're bringing in university folks too, who can talk both about subject material and then also about pedagogy and teaching style. So I think it starts to get folks into more of a self-evolutionary mindset, where they recognize that we're co-learners as teachers. We're not going to just stop and become static over time, and it does seem to change the culture of the faculty in that way. And if they get into a cycle of having one of these teams come visit every 3 or 4 years, it's really a positive experience.
Grant, did they tell you about how they invite these teams? Does it tend to be from collegial relationships across the country, or how do they create these teams when it's not really part of a formal accreditation?
I think it's a combination of two things. Obviously, the faculty have some colleagues and friends that they know of, but then certainly the administration will also add their nominees and will look and ask for references with folks who are outside of the K-12 environment. And a place like New York, where they've got such many universities and colleges here, word gets around, and it's easy to bring folks in to do these for just a day or two.
Yes, it makes me think of an interesting connection. I found as a principal, those teachers who invited in visitors on a regular basis for feedback tended to be those that grew the fastest, almost like inviting mirrors to look into.
And I'll also say at least one head told me this week what a difference between that type of visit and the normal accreditation reflection review, which really, as we all know, tend to become really pretty formulaic and not very deep. And so having these reviews that are deeper more frequently outside the accreditation cycle seems to be important.
Yeah. And I think, are you visiting Ravenscroft in North Carolina?
Will be, yes, in a couple weeks.
I know they do those voluntary departmental reviews too, and I was impressed with all that they were learning from those. All right, you've written a little bit too this week about schools that are moving away from the AP. Can you tell us a little bit about what that's been like?
Well, the APs are a big question, especially at some of the schools I visited this week, some of the big New York legacy schools, Dalton, Marymount, Trevor, Berkeley, Carroll. These are schools with longstanding traditions, and of course, when the subject of APs have come up, it's something that isn't taken lightly. But I'll say that I think the through-going takeaway has been that regardless whether it's a school that has completely gone away from the APs like Berkeley Carroll or one that has done it more selectively, there certainly does not seem to be any negative impact whatsoever on their college admissions profiles. I've talked with college counselors, the director of college counseling, I've talked with heads and faculty, department chairs and principals, and there just doesn't seem to be any kind of negative effect. Now, there, of course, these changes are undertaken very carefully with a lot of great proactive and reactive discussion with the parent body and the community over time, and generally they're started by the faculty, a discussion between the head and the faculty about what they really want to achieve in their teaching. And if some of the APs are working for them and achieving what they want, then they keep those. If others are not achieving what they want in terms of their learning outcomes, then those are the ones they'll get away from. They'll write a better course. So I really think that the myth that that it's hard to break away from the APs, especially for schools with any kind of reputation, a significant reputation, I think that myth is really busted.
All right, and final question. You mentioned Berkeley Carroll. I know you haven't had time yet to write about your visit there, but can you give us a preview about some that we'll read from your blog?
Yeah, I spent all day at Berkeley Carroll yesterday, a great school, a K-12 in Brooklyn. They started a discussion a number of years ago about really aligning what they're doing in the classroom and their learning outcomes with their vision, which is primarily based on three words: ethics, global, and critical. And one outcome of that was a significant discussion about the APs. The faculty largely said, "Wait a minute, these classes don't meet our prescribed learning outcomes," and so over time they've gone away from the APs. But what it's really done is it's just broken a dam of creativity open at that school. In the upper school, they are offering some just brilliant courses to their students, and all the courses that are brilliant, I will say, are collaborative interactions, interdisciplinary work amongst either pairs or teams of faculty across departmental discipline. I'll write up some of those. But then the last takeaway of that discussion, or the current takeaway of that discussion, it's even gotten to the point where they're questioning why a school like that should even be organized around departments, because there's great collaborative interdisciplinary work that are really the key sought after classes by their students. And so it's really changing the whole mindset, and I really credit Bob Vitalo and Suzanne Fogarty and Liz Perry there for just having a tremendously exciting, dynamic environment. So I'll write up all that and probably get it posted this evening.
That's great. Well, we'll look forward to reading that, and have a good day tomorrow at the end of week 4, and we'll talk to you next week.
Okay, thanks, Bob.